Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Gambling Screening, How to Make It Fun. I'm Tracy McPherson. I will be your webinar moderator today. I'm a senior research scientist in the Public Health Department at NORC at the University of Chicago. I also am the person who leads the SBIRT projects at NORC and also is the lead partner with the National SBIRT ATTC. So anything that you have questions about concerning SBIRT or today's presentation or any of the other webinars in our series, I would encourage you to reach out to me. This webinar and all the webinars are produced in partnership with NORC at the University of Chicago, the Brief Intervention Group, or the BIG Initiative, and the National Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment ATTC, known as the National SBIRT ATTC. You can learn more about these organizations and our partnership at www.sbirteducation.com. This webinar is one of several in our 2016 webinar series focused on screening and brief intervention. This year, you'll notice that we are looking at special populations and special topics within screening and brief intervention. As you see, we have several we've already done this year, pretty much providing a nice overview of SBIRT and a lot of the resources that are out there that many folks may not be aware of. But we're also doing several working with adolescents and teens this year, and some other special topics coming up in the spring and in the summer, looking at intimate partner violence and also preventing prescription drug abuse, including intervention skills that can be used to address prescription drug abuse. And we're also doing two this year focused a lot on educators and really how to integrate motivational interviewing techniques when you're educating other people on how to do screening and brief intervention, and how to use case studies when you're educating and training others as well to do screening and brief intervention. So I would encourage you to take advantage of all of those that are on demand that have been conducted up to this date, and to sign up for the ones coming up over the next few months. When you go to the website at the webinars tab, you can actually download the complete flyer. It has the full list, lineup, and links to the on-demand and the live registrations. Today's webinar, as well as all of the webinars that we offer, you will find resources around the PowerPoint slides, any kinds of materials or handouts that were recommended as part of your learning today. You'll also find this is where we put our on-demand recordings, including the one for today, will be posted within the next 24 to 48 hours. And this is also the place where you're going to be able to request a certificate of completion. So we have a dedicated page specifically to this webinar, and everything that you need is available for downloading from that particular website. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of our webinar today. And if you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, you will typically find that you have a questions pane that is in the upper right-hand corner, generally. And you can go ahead and type any questions that you have at any point during the webinar. You don't need to wait till you get to the end. We'll do our best to address really as many of those as we possibly can. And so we would just encourage you to a question comes to mind, just go ahead and put it in there, and we'll leave time at the end to address those. And behind the scenes today is Misty Story, who is our technical consultant and facilitator. And if you have any questions related to technology or other questions about GoToWebinar, she'll be behind the scenes able to address those questions for you. And today's webinar presenter, I'm so pleased to be able to have Jody Bechtold with us today. And we've really been looking forward having Jody for a while now, because gambling screening and brief intervention is really relatively new to many people, and she's one of the few experts in this area, and so it really is a privilege to have Jody. Jody is a well-respected and established professional who passionately serves as an accountability partner to her coaching, counseling, and her consulting clients. She brings a wealth of experience as a trained professional, a coach, a certified MBTI administrator, and a licensed clinical social worker, and nationally certified gambling counselor. She's also a former graduate faculty member of the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work. Jody is a recognized expert on gambling and substance addiction, and she's been interviewed on several TV stations by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, and others, and has delivered dozens of keynote addresses as well as workshops on the topics of gambling and problem gambling and gambling with older adults. Jody has also developed, recorded, and published web and journal-based white papers, podcasts, and other training courses. And in March of 2011, she received the Person of the Year Award from the Pennsylvania Council on Compulsive Gambling for her work in prevention, education, and training, and clinical practice in the field of gambling addiction. Jody holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work, a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Pittsburgh College of Business Administration, and is a graduate of the Professional Coaching Certification Program at Duquesne University School of Leadership and Professional Advancement. She is a licensed clinical social worker in Pennsylvania and a Level 2 nationally certified gambling counselor and a board-approved clinical consultant with the International Gambling Counselor Certification Board. She also earned her Associate Certified Coach in 2012 through the International Coaches Federation. So it's my pleasure, Jody, to have you here and to present today on gambling screening and how to make it fun. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you everyone for joining in the webinar. For those who don't know, this is National Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and I really want to say thank you to Tracy for making this happen during the month of March. So my focus today is to make sure that we have fun while we spend the next hour and almost hour and a half together. So that's my promise, and we're going to talk about several different concepts related to gambling and gambling screening and bring it all together. So the first thing is to really understand what is gambling. What is that definition? What does it mean when we say gambling? And what the New World Dictionary has, Webster's, is to play games of chance for money or some other stake, or to take a risk in order to gain some advantage. And this is a pretty loose definition as compared to Gamblers Anonymous, a 12-step program. They have any betting or wagering for self or others, whether for money or not, no matter how slight or significant, where the outcome is uncertain or depends on skill or chance, constitutes gambling. So we're going to look into that a little bit more. What I'd like to do is to say, what does the gambler look like? You know, this is typically some of the myths that people have, that this is what a gambler looks like. And I would challenge for those who are able to participate live on the webinar, looking at these pictures that I'm showing, it really does show that the gambling addiction does not discriminate. It does not pick one age group. It doesn't pick one gender or ethnicity. We're really looking at a very actively gambling society where the message is very clear and repetitive that everyone does it and it's fun and it's engaging. This to me is the new face of gambling, so keep that in mind as we go through this webinar. So we're going to have a polling question. The question, and I want everybody to be able to participate in this, which one of these activities is not considered gambling? So I'd like you to select. Is it buying lottery tickets, playing fantasy football for money, playing free blackjack online, the stock market trading and investing, or buying raffle tickets. And again, I'm trying to illustrate, while we wait for everybody's polls to come in, trying to really illustrate and drive home the point that it's very confusing to people. What does gambling mean in a very actively gambling society? So we'll wait a few more seconds and let the polls come in, the answers, and then we'll talk about the results. But really think about, what does gambling mean to you? What does it mean to the people that you work with, that you serve? How do you continue to find ways to have that conversation related to gambling? All right, and so the results are in. 51% said that the stock market trading and investing is not considered gambling. 35% said playing free blackjack online. And then we have a couple of percentages throughout the other answers. The right answer is actually playing free blackjack online, because here you're not risking anything in hopes of getting something in return, whereas in the stock market you're actually risking your money when you're investing and trading it. And so I like that most people didn't get that right, because that's actually what's happening in our culture, is we are actively gambling in many areas and don't even realize it. So again, the right answer is playing free blackjack online. So why do people gamble? Well, for a variety of reasons. It's actually exciting for some. It's a form of entertainment. It's a very lucrative form of entertainment for the gaming industry. Some people do it to escape from their problems. Others do it because they actually win money. We'll talk about that later in the webinar. And others do it for the ego, for their reputation, for status, something like that. So there's lots of reasons people gamble. Now this chart is really important. I like to describe the continuum of gambling. You can use this with substance use and other behaviors. So what we're seeing here is that we are going from no gambling to social gambling, and that's just one form of entertainment that people engage in. In the webinar today, I really want to draw your attention to this at-risk area of the continuum. I don't want to wait until people get all the way to a gambling disorder before we start having the conversation. So really looking at ways to identify people that are at risk and how to do some sort of a brief intervention while the entire time we're still understanding that we can do a harm reduction approach. So keep this diagram in your mind as we go through the webinar. So we're looking at what no gambling on that continuum is. That means people really actually don't gamble at all. They don't even play the lottery. Social gambling, it's truly recreational. It's only one form of many types of entertainment that people engage in. And then we get starting into this at risk. We're starting to increase the frequency and duration. We might start to be increasing the total amount of money and the amount of money we place on each bet. We go to problem gambling. We're starting to have more difficulties in major life areas, yet when we try and cut back or stop, we're having difficulty. And here, this would be substance abuse as we used to know it, when people were starting to get into some areas of problems and consequences but weren't quite ready to stop or were unable to stop. And then last, we get all the way to disordered gambling, and that's where we meet criteria for the DSM-5, and we'll go into that in a little bit as well. So in my promise to keep it fun, I think it's really important that people understand the hook. Oftentimes I get asked, why do some people get in trouble with gambling and other people don't? And so I want you to really be able to use these next few exercises as ways of doing brief intervention and continuing the conversation with people. So we're going to put a series of things together to understand this overall hook. Here we have the independence of turns, and to me it's a very fundamental concept. What I like to do is I like to do a coin toss. So for everybody on the webinar, we're going to do a virtual coin toss. And if I was tossing the coin or having someone else toss it, I would do this with an individual. I would even do it with families. I would do it in a group setting. I've done it in workshops with older adults. It's actually a very interactive exercise that you can do. And you toss the coin and you record which one it is. So in our virtual coin toss, it's heads the first time, heads the second, then it's tails, fourth time it's heads, the fifth time it's tails, sixth time it's heads, as well as the seventh, the eighth is tails, and the ninth is heads. Now here's what's happening. I don't actually toss the coin the 10th time. I actually leave that blank, and I say to people, okay, and I'm saying to you, and you can actually type your answer in the chat box if you'd like, what do you think the 10th one's going to be? Is it going to be heads or is it going to be tails? And what we find is that people will give their answer, I think it's going to be heads, because heads appeared more often. Other people might say, well, it's going to be tails because tails didn't appear as often. The key is that you don't actually toss the coin that last time. You use this to create this illustration of understanding. Actually, it doesn't matter. A coin toss, it's 50-50 chance it will be heads or tails, independent of anything prior, where history doesn't matter. And it's very important to understand that historical point. You'll see how it plays out in games, in gaming industry. So I teach people this because then they can relate when they are actually experiencing gambling, where they keep thinking that if they retain the history, they have a better prediction of the future outcome. And that actually doesn't work. The next thing I do is I help people have a definition of skill versus a definition of chance. With skill, we're really looking at the more you do something, the more you practice, the better you're going to be from the first time you ever did it. So you're going to see people talking about reading books about playing poker, blackjack, Texas Hold'em, things like that. They've got to figure out in their mind how to get better with practice. We're also looking at the definition of chance, and again, not trying to be Webster's, I'm really getting people to understand it's unforeseen or unpredictable events that a person has no control over. It's really important to understand that games of chance, you have no control over the outcome. And how does that look? Well, here's our second polling question. Which of the following is a game of skill? So enter your answers. Do you think it's lottery? Do you think it's sports betting, or bingo, or card games such as poker or blackjack, also known as table games? So as you're entering your answers, really thinking about what is a game of skill. This is a great way to educate individuals and get them to better understand, if they already gamble, what types of gambling do they do? Do they gamble with games of chance or games of skill? So think for a moment, because these are pretty common ways of gambling in our society. I'll give you a few more seconds for the polls to come in. Here we go with our answer. Excellent. Most people guessed it or knew it was poker, blackjack, 83%. And then we had the trick question of 16% said sports betting. Looks like the audience is well versed in knowing both lottery and bingo are not games of skill. But let's talk a second for the sports betting, right? Sports betting to me is, unless you're the athlete, it really is a game of chance. Even though we think with all the statistics and everything we know about the game that there's more skill involved, but really it is a game of chance unless you're the athlete. And so when I do different teaching engagements or workshops, we'll also put up a table something like this, and notice I have the question mark next to sports. This is also an area of worry for sports athletes, because again, they could be gambling even though they're not supposed to if they're doing college and things like that. This could be problematic because they could actually do something as the athlete to change the outcome of the game. So I like to help people understand that. Now, we team all these concepts up, so let's look at the illusions of control. What are the traps that people fall for? So some of it related to slot machines, you could see people where they say, I only sit at the end slot machine of a row. I never sit at the slot machines at the front of the door of a casino or club. I always sit more in the middle. I only play the double diamonds. They're the winning machines. And they'll go on, as if this is a way for them to have control over the outcome being that they're going to win. The lottery, many states will post the past winning lottery numbers on their website, and people will study them. Some of the people I work with in older adults, they will have a little notebook and they'll keep track of it, and then they will study the history. That really sounds like the independence of turn or the coin toss that we just did, as if studying the history is going to predict the future. Then we have our infamous bingo illusions we were talking about, where people will look at the serial number at the bottom of the card and see if that's a lucky card. They'll have their special daubers, their little troll dolls, anything like that, again, to have more control. And blackjack. People will say they only sit next to the dealer. They always sit at the far end of the dealer. They'll only sit at a serious table because then they get the cards that were meant for them. And we can go on and on. Roulette. I'm not quite sure how there's control over a marble going around in a circle of a wheel. However, it also does the independence of turns, and it posts the past winning numbers and makes people feel that they can predict what the next winning number is going to be, where the marble is going to land. And my favorite one is horse racing. There's a booklet, the horse's name, the jockey's history, the horse's history, all these things. You hear it when you see the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness. They go on and on for 3 hours about all these statistics, and then in the end, unless you're the horse, it's a game of chance. You never know. And all these sports announcers will go on and on for hours, and at the very end they'll say, well, you just never know, after the announcement of the horse. So I think that's kind of humorous. So then we talk about randomness. And what I'd like you to do in your chat box, if you can, if I were to give you the option of lottery ticket A, which is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or lottery ticket B, 11, 4, 7, 28, and 32, which one would you prefer? Would it be A or B? And I can see some of the answers coming in. Actually, a lot of individuals will pick B, and the reason is because it feels more random. For some reason, in our minds, lottery ticket A appears sequential to us, when really the challenge to your mind is they're just 5 numbers. Each of them are 5 numbers with an equal chance of being a winning ticket. But in our minds, if it's not random, then it doesn't feel like we have as much control. Last concept is reinforcement and punishment. This goes back to behavior theory, right? We want to reward when you do something right, so the likelihood that you'll keep doing it, or we want to punish you for doing something wrong so that you'll stop doing it. But the negative reinforcement is where we actually think we're punishing you, but it turns into a reinforcement instead. And here's what that can look like. If you do your chores, then you get the car keys for Friday night. So there you get what you want. But if you don't do your chores, and your punishment is that you don't get to attend a family get-together with cousins you don't even know that's 3 hours away, and you have to stay at home unsupervised as a teenager. Let me think for a second. That doesn't really feel like much of a punishment, and so I'm not really going to, do my chores next time, because if this was my punishment, there's no incentive for me to do my chores. And this is what it looks like with gambling. When people have an early experience with gambling and they win, they're more likely to continue that behavior. Whereas when people gamble and they immediately get into debt or they lose, they say, this is really dumb, I don't know why I'm doing this, I'm not going to keep doing it. But the one that negatively reinforces often comes from family members, where the individual gambles, gets into financial trouble, and then receives a bailout, which actually helps them continue to gamble and actually gamble even sooner. So stories of family helping and they wonder why it didn't help, it's because it was actually a negative reinforcement. So when we look at all of these put together, this is what I mean by the hook. And these examples and exercises, I strongly encourage you to practice and use with other individuals and with the people that you're serving to help educate them about gambling. When these come together, it's the hook for people. So we really want to make people think and have the conversation, but notice we did that in a fun and conversational style way. So now let's switch to the myths and assumptions. And this list is never ending, so I just put several up here that people can relate to. Some people think if you can afford it, then gambling is not a problem. Other people think that playing the lottery is not gambling because they have been doing it for a very long time. Some think that if you're already homebound, I do a lot of work with older adults, then that means they can't gamble. And that poor people don't gamble. And others, again, retirement setting, think that playing bingo isn't gambling when they're at a retirement community. And the deaf don't gamble at casinos. And I purposely put this because I work with a colleague who does a lot of work with the deaf community and gambling. And she says that they actually gamble a lot, and at a casino no one knows, and they can actually go there and not have communication issues. They could just go and enjoy themselves. So it is a very attractive place to go. And then the last two, like we saw at the beginning, they don't look like a gambler, or what we call countertransference, the professional term for identifying when your own beliefs get in the way of helping others or helping your clients, patients, consumers, anyone. Because what if you do like to gamble? What if you really enjoy it? You might be less inclined to talk about it with the people you serve, right? And that we would call that countertransference. So we're going to talk about prevalence and the DSM criteria. What you see here is 1% of the U.S. population meets criteria for gambling disorder of the DSM, and another 2 to 3% would be considered problem gamblers. So on average, 3%, give and take the study, give and take the year, is about how many people are problem and disordered gamblers. It might not seem like a lot, but the financial devastation that is caused by severe gambling and disordered gambling can be very detrimental to not only the individual but to their entire family system. So then the DSM-5. Yay, let's celebrate that gambling has moved out of impulse control disorders and now resides under addictive disorders in its own category called behavioral addiction. So this actually forces more conversations in the addictions communities to talk about gambling because of where this resides. This also forces payers and insurance and others to have to look at this a little bit more closely. So I'm going to quickly go through the diagnosis. We're looking at that preoccupation. We see that with substance use disorders as well. We're looking at tolerance. Oftentimes it's increasing amounts of money for the desired excitement. There is a withdrawal. Even though you don't ingest anything first, people do experience restlessness and irritability. We look at escape or the avoidance strategy, gambling when feeling distressed. We look at chasing. Again, I talked about some of the cognitive thinking. When people think that the machine is holding their money and they're going to return another day to get it back. And lying. Gambling disorder is considered a hidden addiction. They can conceal the extent for a very long time before it finally comes to the surface. There's a loss of control. Again, just like substance use, that repeated efforts, unsuccessful efforts to control or cut back or stop. We have the risks, significant relationships that we also see in substance use. And then the last one, a term that now everybody understands after the 2009 crisis, relying on others to provide money to relieve that desperate financial situation. Remember back with the rewards and punishments. If you gambled and you weren't rewarded, you might not keep doing it, right, in ways to do risk reduction. So of the 9, these cannot be better explained by a manic episode. So there are some individuals with a true diagnosis of bipolar that in a manic episode will have a gambling spree. We've got to really tease that out. And so we're looking here to meet DSM criteria. You have to have 4 or more of the 9, categorized by mild, moderate, or severe. If you have more than 1 but fewer than 4, then we're still using the term problem gambling. So again, going back to that one graph that talked about the continuum, you know, I don't really want people to have to wait until they're problem and gambling disordered to get help. So we really want to see where can we intervene sooner. One of the reasons it moved to the DSM-5 is because of these co-occurring rates that you're going to see with drug and alcohol as well as some mental health. But I really want to help bring your attention to some of the similarities to the substance use and abuse. This is very helpful for people. Again, we're seeing that preoccupation among the 2 of them. We see that they're both progressive, and we know that denial is one of the hallmarks of both of them. We also see that continued behavior despite negative consequences occurs with both gambling and substance use. The tolerance increases, that there are urges and cravings among them, and there's similar psychological drives, the need to escape, to excite, to self-medicate, or to avoid. So let's take a look at some of the differences. We talk about gambling is not self-limiting. This means that the body doesn't shut down like it does with substances. At some point somebody passes out, they can't take any more of the substance in. If you're not ingesting anything first with gambling, when does the body say it's time to stop? And so we'll see people that gamble longer and longer and longer periods of time because of this issue. Others have difficulty explaining their behavior related to gambling if they were not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And we see there's more intense shame and guilt. Again, if I don't ingest anything first, there must be something wrong with me. I must have caused this. And that also helps with greater denial and stronger defenses. When we think of intermittent rewards, you just don't know if the next time you bet it will solve everything. You don't know if you've been on a losing streak. People think that that makes them that much closer to the next big win. We also see fantasies of success. If this very next bet I win and I win big, I'll pay off all my debts, I'll show you, and I won't gamble again. We don't really hear that with substance use. The next bottle of Jack Daniels, the next bag of heroin is not really the fantasies of success. And this unpredictable outcome. If every time you placed a bet you lost, every time you hit a button on a slot machine you lost, you'd stop doing it. That doesn't happen. With the next bet of a slot machine bet, you don't know if you could win 2 credits, lose, or actually win the jackpot. And that unpredictable outcome is what people make them say, I got to do it just one more time. I have to place just one more bet. And then it's much easier to hide, as we talked about with the lying. There's no biological test. Your eyes aren't pinned, your speech isn't slurred, you can't test positive in a urinalysis test. And we work very hard from the beginning with the financial situation because it is often very diminished, and the family is also in severe restriction of money. So we actually spend a lot of time on the finances of this, which you don't always get to do with substance use. And the last few differences, there's actually intensity of family anger. Again, when someone can spend the retirement, mortgage the house 3 times, spend all of savings, the family becomes much more angry. I believe there's still much less public awareness about problem gambling, right? It's 2016. We're still trying to have this conversation in a wide variety of settings. And there's more acceptance for gambling than for alcohol. One of my favorite examples is the National Council on Problem Gambling has a holiday campaign every year asking and urging people to not buy lottery tickets and scratch-offs and put them for holiday presents during the holidays for Christmas and such for children. And it seems strange to say it that way, but there's a lot of children that actually participate in lottery and scratch-offs with their adult counterparts. And we would never see them actually give children a 6-pack of beer, so we're trying to say please don't give them a lottery ticket. So those differences really do stand out in the treatment of and understanding problem gambling relative to substance use. Now we also look at the mental health side of things as well as substance use. There's several studies, I just picked two for illustration, and you can see here that 73% had an alcohol use disorder as well as gambling, and also 60.4% for nicotine. Now when I think of my time working with addictions, alcohol, drug, everybody seemed to have a nicotine habit as well, and I just think, I wonder what would happen if I would have screened back then for problem gambling, given these high rates. You can see with mood disorders and anxiety, and then here you actually see 60% had a personality disorder. I haven't looked into the study close enough to know, but I would venture to say that that was cluster B personality disorders. And you'll see a high suicide attempt, again, of individuals that also had a gambling disorder. From this meta-analysis done in 2011, you'll see very comparable statistics. Again, nicotine very high and substance use right behind it. And so I urge people that are working with anybody with gambling and substance use to really understand that the nicotine needs to be treated as well as the gambling and substance use to help people have a longer abstinence time. So why are all of these important at this time? I really look at the Affordable Care Act. It was meant to increase coverage, increase access, so more people, more issues seeking services. It's our opportunity to improve patient or client care and help them have a better experience in that center, treatment center. And again, I'm sure most of you already have people that are at risk or have a problem with gambling. You just might not be asking or know how to look for it. And this is a historical way of seeing how we used to get people help. Here, we oftentimes waited until the problem was severe. And I look at this with gambling disorder where it's in the DSM-5 when people are, at their worst, and that's when we're giving them help. But there's a lot more individuals that are problematic and even more that are at risk, but there weren't really clear ways to get them the help. So today what we're really looking at is through all of the SBIRT initiatives and through the Affordable Care Act is to address people that are at risk before they become problematic and help people that are problematic before they reach the addicted state. And so we want to actually get more people than that small top triangle. So you might think it's strange that I introduced technology in a webinar like this, but bear with me. I think you'll be able to gain some insights to this. Technology, it's in the clues, right? I can't tell you the number of people that had ringtones of the Monday Night Football, dun, 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 or they had the slots noise. These are the clues to tell me that we need to talk about gambling. They might be coming at risk or even problematic. The number of slot apps that you can download onto devices that are slots, bingo, and poker, merely just for fun, that could be a potential gateway. And I've had a lot of people that had the phones buzzing constantly with real-time updates on scores. Now March Madness just started yesterday, and we know that this is probably happening for a lot of people and will continue to through the rest of that tournament. So the more and more that we have devices that could potentially become a pathway to at-risk and problem gambling. Yet unfortunately we don't have as many widespread social responsibility programs, prevention, or keeping it safe initiatives to match the technology advances that are happening in our country and in the world. And when I talk about technology, these are all the types of technology devices that I'm referring to, from smartphones and tablets to even the GPS trackers. Here's an example of really thinking about how technology needs to be closer examined in your settings and the people that you serve. Let's take the iPhone. It transcends all socioeconomic classes. We see the young, and we see even the old that are using iPhone and iPad technology. It does address all age groups. It's made text messaging absolutely transformative. We know what the App Store is. We know that people use this iPhone for things like Facebook, Twitter, or to check in on Yelp or Foursquare. And Google actually can give us localized information because of the GPS on the device that knows where we are. We also have multiple generations of video gaming that are entering. So we know these logos and pictures, Angry Birds, and my favorite one that people talk about is Candy Crush. Now think about this iPhone. It is all from a device formerly used to dial and talk to someone. So we really need to embrace technology and look for the clues. So let's look at some pictures that will help bring this together. This might look like an adolescent boy just checking his phone for text messages. Could be his mom. But he's isolated from his friends. He's not skateboarding. He could be getting bombarded with text messages from somebody he owes for gambling debt. You just don't know. It's very private. Here's a picture of Square Cash. This is one form of virtual cash. This is an example of sending money virtually to someone you owe for rent, but this could easily be done to send people money that you owe for gambling. You could even get a family member to think you needed money for food or other essentials and virtually just send it off to whoever you owe money to. I showed this because this is, if you can see the picture, it's 5 slot machines, but they're all connected. This is actually called community slots. And the way it works is that all 5 people have to be playing in order for things to happen on that really big screen at the top. And when stuff happens up there, then coins or credits are dispersed among all 5. This was used to attract people that don't normally go to casinos because they are all hanging out together. So it was a way to draw all your friends to play together and still have that sense of community. It ultimately can lead to peer pressure. When one of you wants to step away because you've spent your money, they all say, no, you have to keep playing so that we can all win more. Another form of technology. This picture merely shows all devices all the time, wherever you go. Doesn't need to be just in your residence anymore. Here, this could be a college student who looks a little bit overweight, looks somewhat unkept. The room is disheveled as well. You can clearly see that he is gambling online and no one knows. He could be missing class. He could have already dropped out for that semester. It's all done in the privacy of his room. We can't, underscore selfies enough. So here we're teaching someone under the age of being able to play the lottery how to celebrate a win and take a selfie as well. Another form of online gambling, again, no one knows what's happening on that laptop. It's very difficult to monitor. Oftentimes younger people know more than their parents about the technology. And here, this one is, it looks like 5 slot machines, and however, it looks like only 4 are playing. Notice the diversity. There's male, female. But when you look closer, the person on the left is actually playing 2 machines at one time. So when we think about some of the DSM criteria, the tolerance, the need for more and more for the same excitement, this person is actually playing 2 at the same time. Another form of virtual cash, virtual money called Venmo, even just virtually feels like I'm sliding you money. Again, all done on a smartphone. While I wish slot machines at some point would spin and say this, please stop, it's time to go home. However, a lot of gaming establishments are 24/7. Again, if it's not self-limiting and the venue's open 24/7, you can see how individuals could become more vulnerable to gambling addiction and not understanding all the hooks. I really wish that we could help correct some people's minds. This slot machine spin, to some, is a near miss, almost won, but really lost. And to others, they store this as a near win. I'm that much closer to the big win, so I need to keep playing. So we really got to understand how technology is and what it does to our brains in bringing all of this together. So let's talk about screens and assessments briefly. I know there's several different screens out there. I'm going to introduce or reintroduce you to two of them. One's called the lie bet, and notice how it's worded. Have you ever felt the need to bet more and more money, and have you ever lied to important people about how much you gambled? Answering yes to either or both means you need to do a full assessment. A newer one came out in 2010 called the Brief Biosocial Screen. All of these reference the last 12 months. And they say, are you becoming restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to stop or cut down? Have you tried to keep family or friends from knowing how much you've gambled? And did you have such financial trouble as a result of your gambling you needed help with living expenses from family, friends, or welfare? Again, answering yes to any of those means the person is at risk for developing a gambling problem. So either of these screens have the word gamble in them, but they are open-ended questions in some regards, or they're closed-ended yes or no, but what they are not asking is the question, do you gamble? This actually is not a good question to ask, because what does gamble mean to the person that you're asking? This is a very common scenario. Do you gamble? No. Do you play the lottery? Every day. And again, in an actively gambling society, what does gambling mean to them? I recently had an unfortunate experience of going to an urgent care on a Saturday afternoon. The person really didn't know what I did for a living, and this is what they asked me. You don't smoke, use illegal substances, or have a problem with gambling, do you? Now, I mean, I really could have had a much more in-depth conversation given what I know and do, but think the average person. Do they say yes? Yes to which question? Do they say no? And so really this question and the way it's asked is telling someone, we don't want to talk about gambling or any other problems with you, so this is why we're asking the question this way. So before we talk about the GBIRT, let's just wrap our minds quickly around SBIRT. The screening of it was to understand the severity of substance use and determine what appropriate level of treatment people would benefit from. From that, do some sort of brief intervention that helps create insight and awareness and maybe some motivation towards change, and ultimately refer to treatment to get the right care. So GBIRT came around, and we were really, really happy because it was a great response to the SBIRT initiative. And really what it was is direct. It's easy to administer and score. It's actionable for the professional using it, and it addresses gambling. So for all of us in the field, we were clapping and saying hooray. So how does it go? Initially, you want to start by having the conversation. How often do you gamble? You would say to the person, for example, buy lottery tickets, go to casinos, play cards with friends. You're really looking for endorsing any activity at all. If you get past those questions, then you want to go to this question. During the past 12 months, have you gambled 5 or more times? Yes or no? Answering yes means that you go to these 3 questions. Again, notice the time frames in the past 12 months. The first question, have you tried to hide how much you've gambled? Here's getting at lying of the DSM. Have you had to ask other people for money to help deal with financial problems? This is the bailout of DSM. Have you ever felt restless, on edge, or irritable when trying to cut down or stop? This is the withdrawal. So answering yes to any of these questions says, hey, let's do a gambling brief intervention, as well as ask additional questions. So often I say to professionals, well, do you know what that brief intervention should look like? Well, in this webinar, I've given you a lot of those. You can dispel the myths and have a conversation about it. You can talk about ways to reduce gambling from a harm reduction perspective. I'm going to show you how to keep it fun if you choose to continue gambling. I'm going to show you the 4 as well as all 10 rules. Do the independence of turns or the illusions of control exercise or conversation. Help them understand on the continuum, hey, right now you're at social. Here's what might happen if you continue to gamble or gamble with more money, you might move to the at-risk category. Or you're at risk and here's what would move you to problem, and help people understand where they might be on that continuum. Have a discussion about the technology that they're using. How much time are you on your smartphone? How much time do you play bingo with that app? But one of the barriers is really, how do professionals learn this information? So I encourage you to share the recorded webinar at any time, listen to it again yourself, have brown bag lunches at work, practice some of those exercises with some of the other coworkers that you have until you feel more comfortable. Do a group exercise. So then the GBIRT says, well, if you answered yes to those 3 questions, continue on with the rest of these. Question 4, have you tried to cut down or stop? Here's your loss of control of the DSM. Have you increased your bet, or how much you would spend in order to feel that same kind of excitement? There's the tolerance. Do you think about gambling even when you're not doing it? There's the preoccupation. Do you gamble when you're feeling down, stressed, angry, or bored? There's the escape. Did you ever try and win back money you had recently lost? Chasing. And has your gambling caused problems in your relationship or at work? There's the risks, significant relationships. So again, according to the GBIRT and the SBIRT initiative layout, and yes to any of those questions, not only do you do a brief intervention, but you refer for gambling treatment. Again, what are those brief interventions? The myths, reducing gambling, keeping it fun, independence of turns, educating about the continuum, and discussing technology. And then where to refer. It is a legitimate question. Where do you refer? For some, you might actually just have to start with the national helpline, and that will direct you to something at a much more local level. Make sure you understand in your state, do you already have problem gambling departments? And what kind of access? Do they have treatment money? How else is treatment paid for? Commercial insurance, again, is actually doing a much better job of reimbursing for gambling disorder, the DSM-4. But you also have to understand with some of the government funding, it actually depends on the person's policy and how those benefits are laid out. Then you have to think, multiple providers for helping one person, is that the best way to do things? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. What about communication issues between all the providers relating to HIPAA? What about transportation issues for that person? Or time commitment issues? These all have to be taken into consideration when you consider referring for treatment. It can be very confusing which direction to go. It can be overwhelming for the individual, and it can demand a lot of time for the provider. So I would suggest, if you don't have something already in place, let's start simple. I like to tell people to prime the environment. This is a poster we use in Pennsylvania. There's national posters. There's a lot of different initiatives you can look into. But by priming the environment, you're actually doing more of an indirect and passive, just like we used to do with domestic violence, intimate partner violence, where we say we can talk about gambling here. You have the posters in the waiting room, in the bathroom stalls, in your office. Make sure you're always screening for gambling as well as other things. Find a way to integrate anything about problem gambling into your full assessment that you're already doing. And intervene. When I say intervene, give examples of gambling activities just like you do for drug or for alcohol or anything else. Incorporate those so that you're normalizing all of those are at-risk behaviors. And then get yourself trained or train your staff and really become more aware of additional referrals in your local community. So how to keep it fun, right? I promise this is going to be fun today. Well, the 10 rules of responsible gaming, you can Google that title and download the 10 rules at any time. I would encourage you to do that and have those handouts for people that you serve. But if you only had time to do the top 4, gambling as a form of entertainment, setting a dollar limit and sticking to it, setting a time limit, sticking to it, and don't gamble on credit, don't borrow or use income meant for necessities. If that's the only education that you could get to an individual, those are the 4 that I highly recommend. But when you actually have the printout for the 10 rules of responsible gaming, go through it with people. If you choose to gamble, view it as a form of entertainment. When you gamble, treat the money you lose as the cost of your entertainment. I tell people they don't go to dinner and then expect their money back at the end. They don't go to a movie and expect their money back at the end. They shouldn't when they go to gamble. Set a dollar limit and stick to it, not only for that time, but for that week or for that month. Set a time limit and stick to it. This is where the retirement trips to the casinos from the retirement communities, they have too long of a time, and then people have idle time and they just spend more money. But really find a way to set a time limit and go home at the end. Always expect to lose overall. That's why it's the cost of your entertainment. Make it a private rule not to gamble on credit. Make it create balance in your life. I think we all deal with this. We want to look like that elephant on the ball. Don't let gambling interfere or substitute for friends, family, work, or other activities. Here you can see avoid chasing lost money. You're only going to make your losses worse. And don't gamble as a way of coping with physical or emotional pain. It should just be for entertainment purposes. And be educated about the warning signs of problem gambling. So if you do have the handout of the 10 rules of responsible gambling, on the other side of that handout, have the warning signs. That way it looks like people are selecting a handout about keeping it fun, and others can become educated at the same time about the signs and symptoms. So we introduced the fun as one approach because what happens when the GBIRT didn't work as it was intended? So I'm part of a digital health program doing a pilot, and we are targeting high-risk Medicaid and Medicare individuals with health issues of heart failure, diabetes, and COPD. The average age was only 54. These individuals were poor and vulnerable, both money and in health, and there was a high cultural mistrust towards professionals. And I think that's important when we always think about screens, because screens happen early on. We were giving them an iPad with a cellular data plan. They were also receiving a weight scale to weigh in because of their chronic condition. We were doing weekly video chats for health and education promotion, and the time of the pilot was 6 months. Some of our concerns were, hey, we're giving access via the iPad to the internet. This is already a vulnerable population. What are we doing about educating about gambling and at-risk gambling? Are there social responsibilities of our organization that we need to be considering? We're giving them the internet and letting them download apps to this iPad. We were doing an in-home assessment, so it was a person-to-person assessment. Everyone did receive the GBIRT in addition to a whole host of other screens and assessments because, again, it was for chronic conditions. It was voluntary participation in the program. There was no cost to them, and we were able to have eyes on the person in their home. We actually could see if they had scratch-offs or lottery tickets on their kitchen table and things like that. So what did we find? We found that of 100 people that we worked with, 4% endorsed any type of gambling. That first question that I showed you on the GBIRT of 5 or more times in the past 12 months. And we said, could this really be right? Well, cultural mistrust was definitely there. And what it revealed was 2 months into the program, we were getting a lot more clues during our video chats about how people celebrated their birthdays, their Saturday night outings, and we were seeing increased data usage on the iPad for internet-dependent gaming like bingo. And that led us to develop the fun assessment. So it's currently still in development with my colleagues Christine Gallagher and Carrie Kearns-Janitz. The three of us have developed this, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit more about it. What we did was we created a series of questions that had open-ended responses. The professional was able to record each response and then code based on that at-risk behavior. I'll walk you through that in a minute. We purposely worded the questions in a more positive and fun way, and this allowed for the sharing of information to be more honest and stigma-free. It also helps strengthen our therapeutic relationship. So here's an example. We asked, how do you calm down, unwind, or relax? And the person said, I like to go to the club and play the cherry machines, but I order a Diet Coke. No alcohol for me now that I have diabetes, he says with a grin. So what we did was we coded that as gambling or gambling risk. And this was an individual who did say no to the GBIRT at intake. So what happened was we implemented the fun assessment with all of those individuals, And what ended up happening is approximately 50% benefited from continuing the conversation and receiving a brief intervention related to at-risk gambling. Another question from an individual, what do you do for entertainment? This is very timely. It's March and I love basketball. I have money on March Madness bracket. I watch every single game. So we also coded that as gaming or gambling risk. And that individual also said no on the GBIRT. Some other questions, how do you like to celebrate? What games do you like to play? When do you have the most energy? And what do you do when you're bored? So you can ask these questions, or a variety, and code their open-ended answer. And if their answer is problematic, decide what's problematic. What at-risk behavior is it? It might not just be gambling. It might be tobacco, alcohol, sex, shopping, any of those things. So in conclusion for the webinar, remember that not every screen and assessment is 100%. Want to highlight the importance of all at-risk behaviors, not just the one they are seeing you for or the one that you currently are most comfortable talking about. Find ways to expand your vocabulary to include the words gambling or gaming in all of your examples. And pay attention to the technology, the ringtones, and of whoever your clients are or your people you serve, and ask more questions. Be very inquisitive. Remember, understand the hook of gambling. It's a great way to answer a question, why do some people fall prey to gambling and others don't? Don't ignore the high co-occurrence rates. Look over your caseload. Look at your agency setting. Who are the people you're serving? Is this something you need to look at closer? Be aware of how you're asking screening questions, how you're teaching people how to ask questions. Make sure they understand the meaning behind it. Be interested in how your clients are using technology. It's all in the clues. Prime your office setting with those posters, with those handouts. Have the 10 rules of responsible gaming in your waiting room. All of those things. That's that indirect way of getting the message. It's safe to talk about this here. And find other ways to get at the right answers, even when you already screen. And lastly, develop a list of who to refer to when someone really does need the training and specialty of a gambling certified counselor. So I last with make sure you have the conversation. You can't have it enough. You can't have it often enough. If you do it in a fun way, you'd be surprised the amount of information that people will share with you. And that's our Problem Gambling Awareness Month slogan, is to have the conversation. And with that, I turn it back to you, Tracy.
Great. Thank you, Jody. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a really rich presentation, and it was fun, and it was very interesting. So thank you for keeping it fun.
Sure.
So I'm going to take a look here at some of the questions. We're going to remind folks that the question pane is typically over in the right upper corner, and we have some questions that look like already in the queue, but folks can feel free to continue to enter them. Let me pull up the first question. All right. Well, one is just, looks like two comments, very similar though, so maybe they both folks are looking for some sort of comment or reaction. Playing free blackjack online can lead to gambling for money later on. And someone says playing free blackjack online, if it consumes so much of your time, which is valuable, to the detriment of your family, job, health, maybe gambling to me. So I don't know if you have any comments or react to that.
Yeah, no, you know, again, it's going to be something where you continue the conversation with the individual. I completely support what those individuals are saying. It can be the gateway to a problem, more time, all of those things. They might be playing on a free online site, and then they think they're so good that they move over to a paid site. So it clearly could be on the progression. I would say that they could be at risk for doing that. But when we look at the true definition, it's spending money or possession, and when you're risking something up front when the outcome is uncertain. That was the only reason I highlighted the answer the way I did.
Great, thank you. Let me take a look here for some additional questions. Let's see. Gambling is intermittently reinforced, which is the hardest behavior to extinguish. That's a comment, but then there's a related question about what is intermittent reinforcement. So we're reacting and answering two questions at the same time.
No, and that's good. Absolutely. Intermittent reinforcement is the strongest predictor of maintaining a behavior. Having constant reinforcement, some sort of a reward every time, is the way of initiating a behavior. So, we think of discipline. We can even think of training animals. And I think of dogs in particular. And so initially you're always rewarding them with a treat. And then after that, you don't always reward for the same behavior. And that anticipation of, am I going to get a reward this time, is going to make them do that. So when we translate that to gambling, I don't know if I'm going to win, but the anticipation of I want to find out if I am makes me want to place that bet again and again and again. And so because they don't win every time, because they don't lose every time, and it's intermittent, they don't know when it's going to be, then that's what keeps the behavior going. But absolutely great statement and great question.
Great, thank you. And someone would like to, if you could clarify when you say bailout, what does that really mean?
Well, when I used to do trainings before 2009, nobody knew what bailout meant, and then the federal government was bailing out banks and cars and car industries, and everybody knew what the term meant. What we're referring to here is when an individual is gambling, and typically it's about money, and they either spend more money than they have, they do cash advances, they get behind on their expenses, and they go to someone and say, hey, can you give me money to help pay my rent or my mortgage or something? That is considered a bailout because they're actually asking for money since they spent their money gambling. And that reinforces that's my faster way to gamble again, because now the pressure's off of me. I don't have the stress of being behind on my bills. Oh, I'm going to go gamble because I like it, because I'm good at it, and maybe I'll double my money and then I'll be able to pay that person back even sooner. So families tend to be the first ones to provide bailouts, and they solely do it thinking they're helping. And unfortunately, it's helping the person gamble again instead of helping them stop gambling.
Great, thank you. Thank you for elaborating on that. I think that helps people to understand a little bit more about that term. All right, let's see. Here's another question for you. What suggestions do you have for more clinical training in the area of helping someone with a gambling disorder?
Oh, I love that. I would start at the National Council on Problem Gambling's website, and I would go to the counselor search, and it's done by state. And so my answer is unfortunately not going to be the same depending on the state. Some states will have BACCs like myself that are able to provide training and consultation and guide a person that wants to learn more about this. I think that's really helpful because some of the initiatives are at a state level. So there's really nothing at a federal level that I can give a global answer. It's really state specific. But the National Council is one of the first places that I started when I was doing my training and seeing. There's also from the state level, certain states have councils on compulsive and problem gambling, and that's another place to look. And the third way is if your state provides any type of funding for treatment and training, that would be access as well. So I know Iowa is an example. I have some colleagues there. They have a really good initiative. Oregon does, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of opportunities. You just really have to look state by state. And at any time, you can easily email me, and I'll help guide you through that process as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a few more questions coming in here. Many people play poker and see it as a skills-based endeavor as opposed to chance. How can you persuade someone who is playing poker that it looks like this is really that really is a problem, that it really is problematic? I think that's what they're asking.
Okay.
So how can you persuade someone who is playing poker that it is really problematic?
So I'll have two answers for that, because again, you would know better which way you would want to go when you're having conversations with that person. The first one is getting them to understand where the skill is in the game and where the skill ends. They don't have any control over the cards that they get, but they have control over what they do with the cards that they are dealt. And oftentimes in their mind, they see the entire game as skill, instead of all games of skill have some chance to them. And so if you can help them dissect and break down where the skill is and where the chance takes over, that might be one avenue. The second is, if they are displaying any type of at-risk behaviors, have them go through the 10 rules of responsible gambling and and all 10 rules, and walk them through a plan of how much time they'll spend, how much money, not only just per day or per week, but per bet. And what I call that is really doing a harm reduction plan. It's creating a small box like a playpen that they can play in. And what eventually may happen for the person is they'll keep coming back and telling you how they could not stay within those rules. They could not stay with their own set plan. And then that allows for the conversation to talk about when it becomes more and more problematic and the DSM criteria. So I find that to be a nice persuasive way that still gives them some opportunity to create their own plan initially, and to keep modifying that with you until they have the awareness or insight that they just can't stick to the plan.
Thank you. And I think you just answered one of the other questions, which was, does harm reduction work for gambling? And you were just talking about how you can improve harm reduction. So I suspect the answer is yes. Did you want to elaborate on that at all?
Sure. Again, my initial work was with substance use, and I know that harm reduction is not always endorsed or appropriate. So when I did learn and become much more trained in gambling, I was surprised by how much harm reduction does work. If for no other reason initially, it keeps people coming back. When they sit and seek help, and they're told, well, just don't gamble, or you know you're going to have to stop gambling, there's a really high dropout rate. So by using harm reduction, and specifically the 10 rules, you're keeping some control with that individual. And a lot about gambling is control. And so the harm reduction 10 rules lets them maintain control, that allows them to keep coming back, that allows them to keep the conversation going with you and staying open and sharing as opposed to shutting down. But I do respect that in some settings harm reduction is not allowed, or for some people, if they've got legal problems and the judge orders them not to ever gamble, that we're not above that law. And I understand in inpatient facilities it's not appropriate, but most people seeking help for problem gambling will do so at an individual or an intensive outpatient type level, and that's where harm reduction really could keep them coming back and keep them talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have another question here about biochemical. So biochemically, does gambling have a euphoric sense to it, like substance abuse?
Yeah. Oh, I love the question about the brain. I don't actually do full justice like some of my other colleagues that are researching it, but there is very clear evidence that there is a lot happening in the brain when people are gambling. So you do not need a substance, ingesting a substance first to create the pathways and to light up the brain. So some really fascinating research is being done currently on that. Dr. John Grant has done some good stuff, and Mark Potenza out of Harvard, as well as my colleague Dr. Alyssa Wilson. While there's a lot of brain stuff on the chemical side of research, we're a little bit behind, or a little bit not quite as up to speed. So don't think you're going to find tons and tons and tons and tons of research out there, but the research that is currently being done is very, very helpful and wonderful.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how is, quote, unquote, so quote, having the most energy related to gambling?
For some people, they will talk, and again, the pilot that we were working with was, again, poor, vulnerable, and medical chronic conditions. And so in the context of what we were doing, we're seeing people that medically and physically don't have a lot of energy. So we wanted to understand, when did they have more energy? And some would endorse when they were doing scratch-offs, or when they were at a casino, or at the local club, as one person also said. They really saw that as having a lot of energy. So there was something happening in the brain and with their senses. That whole experience to them was invigorating.
Interesting. Thank you.
There is there's a lot of talk about people maybe that have these chronic conditions, like chronic back pain, chronic hip pain, and when they go to a gambling establishment and they're gambling, they're not reminded of their back pain or their hip pain, and so then they equate, when I gamble, I feel better. And really what's happening is they're just dissociating from the chronic pain because they're so focused, narrow-focused on the gambling. But it's all in that person's association or perspective.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do you have any statistics or research that you could share about low-income gambling frequency as compared to other income levels?
Oh, I like the question. I actually don't know of any research that is that specific. Some of that is, again, there's not as much research being done around problem and gambling disorders as you are used to seeing with mental health and substance use. So unfortunately, I'm not aware of anything at this time related to that.
Okay, thank you. The next question here is, some treatment providers see gambling itself as a, quote, harm minimization strategy. How can we help promote gambling as a serious disorder and change culture among this audience?
Oh, great one. And I do understand that when people are trying to do risk reduction or harm reduction of certain chemicals or lifestyle, gambling might seem like the less risky. There are some videos. I know out of Connecticut they were doing some videos really talking about people that had been in recovery for substance use for quite a long time, and how they then became disordered gamblers. And if they had only been told when they were working on their recovery for substances how vulnerable they were, they would have never done that. So I'm thinking, if you do look for some YouTube videos, I know there's some good stuff that came out of Connecticut that might actually help start the conversation and talking about what's a better alternative that's always reducing risk for all behaviors.
Thank you. This question is about your fun assessment. And we have us to the fun assessment when it's completed?
Sure. I didn't even think about that, only because it has been specifically developed for poor, vulnerable individuals that have chronic conditions. What you are able to do at any time is take any of the questions that I shared in the webinar in single or adding all of them together and see how it works for you.
Right, thank you. This next question is, to what extent do we see cross-addiction with gambling addictions?
Yeah, the cross-addiction, I guess the better way to look at that is we know there's the high co-occurrence that we talked about in the webinar. What we don't know from those percentages is either which came first or did they occur at the same time. Some people, you could say some of the younger adults, might associate gambling and drinking together, as opposed to I'm drinking, now I'm not drinking, so now I'm gambling. That's the only limitations of some of the research is we don't know how those are occurring on the timeline. In my practice, in my full assessments, I'm always asking people, do they drink before, during, and or after gambling? Do they do drugs before, during, and or after gambling? So you can kind of play with those and look at how that might play into it. With process addictions overall, we know that there's some cross-addiction. We're looking at that compulsivity. We're looking at issues of control and things like that. But some of this is still fairly siloed, unfortunately, and there's not a lot of combined research to help fully well articulate the answer to your question.
Thank you. This next question is more about bailout. If you don't bail out a family member, what is the better way to support them?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for asking that. We do find when we're working with individuals and family, however family is defined, that we say things like, please, whatever you do, if you can, don't give money. And so we'll say things like, offer to help them with their groceries for the next week, or offer to give them, some people, you could, if people are going to gamble, they're going to gamble no matter what the solution is, but you can still say, maybe you could offer to give them a gas card so they can put gas in their car for the next week or month or until payday or something like that. So there are other ways to offer support and resources without directly giving money. I think that's the real key is if you can avoid giving money, that's what you do.
Okay, great. This next question, do you think that free-to-play social gaming sites can be used as a moderation or harm minimization goal? That answer would depend on the conversation with the particular individual you might be thinking of. If it is a way of reducing harm because they still want to be engaged in some form of gambling or gaming, then yes, endorse that because it's reducing harm from what they were currently doing. I would not introduce it if I'm not trying to reduce harm. So I've actually had people, and again, I think that's the key, is all your answers should reduce harm until someone is willing to choose abstinence. So that's the ultimate goal of harm reduction. So I've had people that played the slots and they said, don't tell me to stop gambling, I still want to gamble, and we've agreed on playing the lottery once a day. So it's still a form of gambling, but it's not nearly as fast. It's only once a day, and that's the solution that person agreed to. So these are really ongoing conversations to do the correct risk reduction, harm reduction solutions. Great, thank you. Okay, we have a question here. any statistics you are aware of about gambling with different minority populations such as Native Americans or Hispanics?
I know there is research. Again, my world has been heavily focused on older adults in the last couple of years, but I do know that there is research on Native American Indians as well as Hispanics, but off the top of my head, I cannot tell you the statistics, so I'm sorry about that.
Okay, sure. The next question, where can I access resources to be trained as a specialized gambling counselor?
Misty was able to put up the link for the National Council on Problem Gambling, where you find help by state. And again, if you can email somebody in your state that is a board-approved clinical consultant, that to me is the best, fastest direction to go. Also looking at whether or not you have a state council and on problem gambling, and they are offering trainings throughout the year, or if the government of your state has a problem gambling department that is also involved in treatment funding, and look at your surrounding states as well. I got a lot of my training in Delaware and New Jersey when I was first starting out, because Pennsylvania didn't have any training at that time. So you can also look at reciprocal states.
Great, thank you. And we have time for at least one more question, and this question is, can you explain more about why poker is considered a skill game? Seems like it would be more about luck.
Yeah. Again, because the skill is once you have the cards, what you choose to do with them. And so that's where the skill comes in, and that's why there's all kinds of books written about it. You don't have any control over the cards you get, but you have control over what you choose to do with the cards you have. So there is a sense of strategy and skill to it. But one could wish and hope that it was about luck too.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, and I thank all of the participants for asking some interesting questions. We tried to get as many of those as we could in, and we were almost able to answer all of them. So thank you very much, Jody, for a terrific webinar and a terrific Q&A session. We're going to wrap up by saying thank you very much to everyone who's participated and joined us today, and to you, Jody, and to let everyone know that the materials that were presented today, the PowerPoint slides, are actually they're already posted to the website, but that is also where you can request your certificate of completion. As soon as the recording of today's webinar is available, we're going to put that also up on the website, and you will be able to access the on-demand recording for free 24/7. What we would like to do is ask that you, after you complete the recording, or your colleagues complete the recording, that they can also go back to the website to complete an evaluation survey. So for those of you who are participating live, you can see that our technical facilitator has already put a link to the brief evaluation form over in your chat box. And for those of you who will complete this in the future, that link will be placed on the website. So please click on the evaluation survey link for the on-demand viewing. You'll also receive a follow-up email if you're participating live today that will have links to all of this information. We really appreciate completing the survey. This is really the best way for us to provide feedback to our funders to get continued support to bring you this quality education and training. And last but not least, we do hope that you will come back and attend and register for our series of webinars that are coming up. We have one in April, one in May, two in May actually, and another one in June. So please sign up, continue to join us, and share the information with your colleagues. and participate in the on-demand recordings of those that we've already presented this year. And so also, I'll just close with saying that if you have questions about SBIRT implementation, evaluation, training, and you have some questions that you would like some telephonic technical assistance with in addressing, you are certainly welcome to email me, and I'd be glad to help you. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Jody, for a terrific webinar. And I thank our partners with the National SBIRT ATTC for bringing this webinar and all of the webinars to you this year. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great day, and I look forward to having you on a future webinar.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone who attended.
Thank you. Bye-bye.